Hi and welcome back to MDriven. I'm gonna walk through some of the many updates and improvements that has been made during this summer. And on my screen now is just an MDriven designer, and I saved the file at demo August demo. I can just open the model directory in a folder to see that this is currently the only thing here. And I made a list to keep track on what I should say about the improvements. So we're going to start with the static images that has become easier to use. So what do I mean by that? Having a view model, you work with the static images to be as placeholders for something else. And before you could sort of drag one out and you could set some tag values to point to a specific place in an URL or have the image as data in your system different ways. And we made it a lot easier by just being able to copy and paste something. So if you were to, let's find an image, just print screen, grabbing up screen presso because I think that's good, copying the image, and now as you have it in the copy buffer, you can simply be somewhere in either the tree or in the view model and press paste. And then you're given an option to give this new column a name, my image. And now I got a warning that it occupies the same space, so I'm just gonna drag it out. So here I can see that I have the static image column available. And how was that achieved? It has given a folder name called xtimages/myimage.png, and my image was the name that I gave it in the little pop-up dialog. So, and what has actually happened is if we go to the folder where the modeler file is saved, is that I've got an demo AssetsTK folder created for me that has the external images catalog in it, which in turn has the thing from my clipbook. So that's how it works, and this enables us to have this available even when we go to the server to deploy this. Let's try to deploy it, and I'm going to run the turnkey prototyper. I'm going to check if I have, you have 201, okay, that's fine. So I'm going to start the local prototyper. Create something, do one thing, save and continue, and then you have the static image here. And that's one way to get a static image in place. Another way would be to sort of have an image file. So if you were to Google cars and save image as download, show in folder, if I have this image in my clipboard, I can again just paste and get asked what I want to call it, car, and that image column will be added just like the other one. So that's the copy paste of an image file. And of course, as you see, since the image is actually shown already in the designer, and this is new, this wasn't like this before, because if this is a simple expression that turns into be an existing file in the AssetsTK, we will actually do our best to show the image in design time, and this makes it easier for you to do design elements to get a feel for how it will look in runtime. This model isn't saved, but if I save it, the turnkey prototype will restart, and then I see the image immediately. So it's a quick round trip to work with graphical elements in your views. This is of course one way to do the UI, but the great thing that we introduced and have been working more on is the placing containers. So let's redo this view to a placing container view instead. And what happens when I say it should have a placing container on the root level is that column is not in placing container. So we get warnings that states that all columns really should be inside the placing container once you decide to use them. So let's make this one a column to have the data stack on top of each other like this. And I'm just gonna drag stuff in here. And then the view renders differently. And what we can do now when we have the placing container is to adjust the perceived width and height. And as we can see in VPF, this will take all the space it can. So what we want to do is to set a limit on how large we want it to get. So let's say that this can be at most 200 pixels high. And if that's the case, then this one has the same issue, so 200 pixels. And if the space is needed, then it will be reduced. So we could say that it should be at least 100 minimum. This is one way to get your design input on how things should look. And of course, if you don't want the image to resize at any point, you would just set these two equal. So resaving this, and we have a similar view over here. So I've shown this one, and that the images can be resolved in design time, and images upload to server with AssetsTK, and SVG, so scalable vector graphics. That's just a different type of image, of course. And visit this site, download PNG, so I have a PNG file in my clipbook, and I want to add it here, car as PNG, and save that. And now the car is as a PNG over here. So, and this is also new, that we actually can show PNG pictures, images in, oh, why did I call it PNG? It is an SVG, so my mistake. If I want to rename it, of course the column can be renamed without issues, but now I have a hard name on my file over here. So if I were to rename this as well, the image would disappear from here and it wouldn't show over here. So what I would need to do as well is to seek it out over here and rename it as SVG to have the correct name. And once that is done, if I resave the file, it will pop up over here, but probably I would need to switch the views here to get it to show here. Right. So like that. Also in VPF we say what do we mean actually. Well, we can use it in runtime as well. Let's show in the prototyper. I was supposed to switch it to XML persistence and start it as a VPF application to view one thing, and now I'll also see the SVG over here. But we're going to focus on the web view. So this is now black, and it's normal behavior for SVGs to be rendered in one single color. And what we have enabled is, and normally SVGs also react to CSS styles. So I'm going to show a few new things for styles in models. So if we do a style in model and create something that's called new style, and we pick a target as component content, the data within the component. So the component here is everything, including the label, but the component content would be the main part, in this case the SVG image. And here I can define stroke colors, and there are no colors to choose from, but I can add a new color. Let's make this sort of ugly, like that. Here you can copy and paste the hex values and to more easily get the exact color from a color picker on the web or something like that to get the exact value. But once you have defined a color, you can choose that on the component content. And if we then sort of save this and head back to, we need to state that this SVG should use this style that's called new style 1. So I'm gonna have a style ref on this view model column. Okay, I had a little break to check this one. Set the stroke to influence the output. Turns out that this only works for inline SVGs, so you need to actually expand the SVG as data and not have it as a static image reference. So I'm gonna come back to that. StylesInModel now updates view when changed. So what do we mean by that? Is that if you actually do apply a style, we can take style ref 1. Now what do I call it? New style 1. New style 1. And this was now updated to use the stroke color that we set, and we also had the fill color. I'm going to change that back, but suppose that I add another color, this one, and call that green. Doesn't really matter, it's just easier to maybe find them. And now this is updated straight away. This wasn't like this before. Also, when drawing the in place or the view models that you have dragged onto diagrams, styles are now used, and also images resolved in the same way as they are done in the view model editor. So heading back to the list, this one. So columns that are images, easy switch between different types of images in UIFirst. So what do I mean by different types? Well, this is a good example then. If I choose the UIFirst icon on this, we first discover that this is an image, and then this button is made available. So currently the data is a URL to a static image, and we can click to change that. This will just loop through the different definitions. So currently data is a blob with PNG or JPEG, or the third option, data as XML text for SVG. So it loops through these three types of images that you may make use of. And of course the static images are very good for static design elements, or when prototyping to get something up and running quickly. But sooner or later you want to switch it to use information from data instead, and then this button helps you to do the things that you of course also can do by reading up and changing the tagged values accordingly, but that's much harder. So this is just an easy way to get to the same functionality. I'm going to switch this then to use data as XML text for SVG. And of course then it doesn't render because this isn't SVG data. But let's make it SVG data instead. So suppose that this was some SVG data, and can we get some data like that, I wonder? Well, let's head over to where we have the actual file and open with Notepad. So this is the data within the SVG file, and what if we were to bring that out to just have it as data in the system? Of course this is still a constant, but as you can imagine this could just as easily be data from our database. So I'm going to paste that in over here, and so that's a data as now the data, the SVG is represented as data within here. So saving that and heading back to the runtime, I now see that this respects the color change on. Firstly, I see that it renders. Oh, maybe you don't see it because it's outside of screen. So first I can see that it renders, and also that it has the greenish color that I defined. So if I were to actually change this color to this one and save, this would also update, and that makes it very practical to signal graphical elements. You only need one element, but you can switch the color by having rules on your data or in your system. So this is partly shown then, and this is shown. We made some changes to when to render action. What I mean with this is that you can easily add an action column, of course, that does something. Let's say that it switches the style ref on this one. So I'm going to change this to his expression, and with something case true, false. So when it's true, I'm going to use the style 1, and when it's false, I'm going to use the style 2. And with something is not recognized, so I'm going to add that as a new variable of type boolean. And so when this, so this will return style 1 when with something is true, and otherwise it returns style 2. So that's the expression for the style. And let's do the action to actually toggle this one to be not its value when clicked. And if we then just save this and click this one, we can see that it switches between new style 2 and 1. Of course, new style 2 doesn't have a definition, so it turns black, and that's okay for our purposes. But this action is, we can actually, and we have been able to do that before as well, to say that it's rendered by something else. And what we mean by that is that when it doesn't show as its own action button, instead it's taken over by some of the other controls. So that's all good and well, but it has been a bit of a roundabout way to do things, because if you want this image to be an action, it's easier if you just could pick the action it should be. So these two things help you to find what the definition should be. So when I choose that this image should be the action column, it firstly the action disappears from view, because now it's rendered by, and it's rendered by car as SVG. So these are just two ways to get to the same functionality, and I think this new way is a bit easier, because you often point to a picture and then you want that to be an action, instead of pointing to an action and wanting that to be rendered by something specific. So saving that, and now my image is a an active button that toggles the color of it. Yeah, so that one. And quite often when you do a design, you might want to have a clean slate, and you don't really want to see the left side or the top menu, and that has been available turning off by CSS and some tag values, but we made that easier. You now can set it straight on each view model. So if you turn off the hide the sidebar and just say you see that that's no longer available for us, and you can also hide the main menu bar and save that. And then we are completely clean, and there's even no padding around anything because we are completely clean, and this is totally up to you, but we might still want to have the padding. So let's see how we would go about that. So in our PlacingContainer, which is a column, we might want to have padding, and we can add that by using a style. So let's say that this, and this is always an expression. So let's say that this is new, or actually let's grab the same expression as we had for this one, just to be able to see the difference. So on the placing column style expression, we're gonna have this, and that's very well, but on this new style we're gonna do a new style target, which is the PlacingContainer. I'm gonna add that on. PlacingContainer should have some padding to it, like 7. So what happens now when I click this one, I have padding 7, no padding, padding 7, no padding. So that's a way to turn off top and side menu in the view model. So, and this enables you to do this on a per view basis. Of course, you need to be careful to actually have actions to navigate to and from this, because there's no help for you now that you have removed all the built-in actions, but that's okay. This also works the same for VPF. So if we were to start the VPF prototyper and bring up the view, we still have the left side and the top menu, but as we go into the view one thing, everything that disappears. We just have the tab items over here. And of course this works showing the padding being added, but it doesn't switch the color on the SVG because that one isn't quite sold yet for VPF. Right. So moving on, PlacingContainer. So there's a quite few new things here. So the PlacingContainer. There's lots of things to talk about regarding the PlacingContainer. We're just gonna name a few things in this video and come back to it in other videos. So now I have this one placing container with a column, but likely you have child placing containers within this. So I'm gonna add, let's add 3 child placing containers, and these are rows, and when I point at these, don't really see anything because they are down here. Yeah, because all the columns are rendered before, and then you have the placing containers. So normally when you have child placing containers, you want to move all your columns into one of these so that it's a clean tree of placing containers, and then you have the columns within the leaves of a placing container, so to speak. So I'm going to move these into here, and what happens is that the columns are placed on this row. I'm gonna move these details into this one. And I'm gonna move these into the last one, and I have no real idea what I'm doing here. I'm just setting up an environment to show some tests. So when I click, if I click this one, I can see that this will be rendered within this box. If I click this one, this will be rendered within this box, and this is within this box. We have ability to control what we see, to see how sizes will reflect the rendering, and currently there's not much happening because we have not instructed the placing containers to behave in any special way. First thing, to get this one to use all its space if possible, then we would instruct it to I guess we need to on the parent, on the column, we want to say that it should justify its content in the Y direction. So these tags are new, and that's one of the things that I wanted to mention, hints about actual direction in row and column. So whenever you have a column like this, then justify content denotes the Y direction, and align items the X direction. If this instead was a row instead of a column, then justify content would be the X direction. So this will help you to make sense of these settings for placing containers. So on this parent, on the column, we want to justify the content in the Y direction, and we want it to have space between. So now this one, these are all spread out over the available area in the column. Going back to the column, we want to, in the X direction, align the items within. So as I said, if we have this, for example, this only uses this little space, because the align items of the parent isn't set. But if we set it to stretch and we watch that one, we can see that okay, now all the space is available, and this is the same for all the childs. And of course, if you have one child that should be different, you can override the parent's stretch value, in this case, to something else, to start. That will only affect this placing container and not the others. So these are still on stretch, but this one can be made a different value by using this override. But normally you have that not set, and then it will take the value from the parent, which in this case is stretch, so that's fine. So this is a grid, and we probably want that to grow, and as data becomes available in it. So that we would do simply by saying that it can grow a value bigger than 1, and it's a relative value. So if you have multiple growths, it will grow in the ratio that you have this value of. So a higher value, it will grow faster. So now this one will take up all this space, and that's okay. Let's make sure that we have a button to actually add some detailed values, and then I need to go back to the view model and say that I shouldn't hide the sidebar anymore, because that's where the action is to actually add some values. So what we can see is that the details grid has grown, and things react to changes. And if I add details, I can see that well, let's see what should happen when there's no room anymore. So that's the setting that I can do on this placing container, that let's say that it's allowed to scroll, but then it says X direction. Actually, this one is probably something that I want to do in the Y direction, so I'm going to change this to a column instead. And that's fine. And the one here is a row, this one is a row, and this is a column, and that's fine. And then I say it can scroll in the Y direction. And what happens then when things get tight is that it starts to scroll. So that's probably more what I want. Yes. So I'm gonna talk about StylesInDesign. I'm gonna talk about this FloatInParent first. So let's say that all of this is actually a child container of this one. So I can drag that into here. And what does it mean really? Well, now it will first render the grid, and then it will render the child placing container over here. But that's not what I wanted. I want to have this to sort of hover above the this grid, and that is achieved with setting the FloatInParent on a placing container. So let's see. Now this takes some space and this takes some space, and if I save this, I can see that it looks like this, that the images comes below the grid table, and but I'm changing this PlacingContainer to be FloatInParent instead. FloatInParent has a slightly tilted arrow, so you can see the difference. And if I save that, I can see that the images float on top of the grid. So that's great for some use cases, but maybe not what I want all the time. It's especially great if you want to add some floating buttons that should be there from time to time, or should be there depending on some rule. Then you can turn this off. Let's see. So I'm gonna add a button, I guess, to let's see, I'm gonna add a button in this one. And this is also new for the summer, that if you stand in a PlacingContainer, it should actually add the column on the correct place. So let's say that this button sets or toggles a variable that's called vHidden, and that's not available currently, but we're going to add it being a boolean. And we're going to use that hidden variable on this PlacingContainer on the visible expression. So that makes it possible for me to show something like this. And of course, since this is only available in runtime, I probably want a way to do away with these things in design time. So that's why we have the HideInDesign property here. So you can turn those off while designing. It will still be here, the PlacingContainer, but the values won't be rendered. And that makes it easier for you to build a complex UI with different layers that you can hide and show these things. So I'm going to put a style on this. Let's see what we have for styles. Yeah, we had the one with the background. I'm gonna do a new style 2, do a PlacingContainer target, and have a new color that's gonna be like purple, and I'm gonna make a fill out of that purple. And so that's new style 2. And what you can do now is have a style for design. Oh, this is an expression. So the expression is, in my case, new style 2 as string then. But since that expression won't be evaluated until runtime, so that was a poor choice of naming, because already used new style 2, but assumed it should be empty. I'm gonna change this one to, oh, I'd rather change the original place where I used it was on the this one. I'll change that to 3 instead. So I get it. I don't have it in the background. So whenever I flip this, it will show the and as you can see this style in runtime, but not really in design time, because it's an expression and it depends on the value. You also have a possibility to actually say what style it should use during design, and that makes it easier for you to see what happens when you do things this way. So that's the FloatInParent, and we can talk a lot about the FloatInParent because it's very usable, and if you want to do small pop-ups warning the user for something, it's quite good to use for something like that as well. And this style for design, and the HideInDesign, and the hints about actual direction for row and column, and animations. So animations is an easy way to get some simple animations going, and we're not targeting to solve all design needs and issues with this functionality. We just want to target the usual common stuff, that so you can save time in your day-to-day work and keep as much as possible within the model without needing to resort to outside CSS and HTML, because then it starts to cost you time and money. So we want to keep being able to stay within the model as long as possible. And for a production system, there will be some external CSS and HTML, of that we are sure, but the bulk will still be in the model and easily to maintain. So what are the animations then? If we do on this style, we can choose one of the animations. We want to animate this from left to right when it shows, and if we do that and save, this one will come in like this instead. So that's animations. And sometimes when the UI is should depend on the screen size of the client, of course you can do this with the CSS and media queries, but there's an easier way to stay within the model, and it's to declare these two variables, ClientScreenWidth and ClientScreenHeight. So I'm going to do that, and you can read about this in the wiki as well. And let's say that this image shouldn't show when the screen size is a certain width. So the ClientScreenWidth, I'm going to add a new variable and say that this is an integer. And if this is larger than 400, then it's true, and then the image should show. So if this comes in, but then the screen gets smaller than 400, maybe so when the screen gets smaller than 400, we hide that particular column. So that's one way to do simple media queries. And lastly, in this walkthrough, icons on columns. What that refers to is that it's been made easier to access the material design icon set. So here you can search on names or browse them if you want, and we don't show all because it became quite slow. Let's say this one should be something with mail. I guess we will take this one, and once we have it, it shows up on the column headers. Let's do another one on this. You can see which one I picked, and it shows up over here. And saving that, and the icons show up on the labels. And this also works for the VPF prototyper, same way. And it follows the styles that we have defined. So currently this is have an own style of its own, and the default value will turn black on the stroke. But if we were to change this, the font size and font type, it would change accordingly. So let's try that. This is the new style one that has the stroke color of that. Let's say that there's a font definition. I'm gonna add a new font. I'm gonna do sans serif 16 points. And let's turn this into something else. 72 points. Yeah, okay, this one is special because it's a daytime control. Let's not hang up on that now. Actually, it's the value within, right? So if I choose a date, I can see that it's really big, and also here it's not following because these have a fixed size. If I wanted to target the actual label, I would have, yes, I should have add a target style for that. So the label should have this font and this font color, and let's remove it from the component content. Doesn't make sense to have it there. Then I get the label really big, and the icon, and get the icon and the label really big. So that's how you can use those. And I'm not sure if this is the correct size of this one. Maybe Dennis, you could have a look at that one. So that was, we're through the list, right? Great. Happy coding. See you next time.